Slap fight alert, everybody! MSNBC lion Lawrence O'Donnell just dragged CNN's Jake Tapper over a news story. And you know something? This is kind of amazing. Welcome to Occupy Democrats. I'm David Reddish. So for this story, we need to talk a little bit about Jake Tapper, the CNN news anchor who, earlier this year, published a book accusing the cabinet of former President Joe Biden of hiding his mental decline. For more on that, see our other videos here on the channel. However, suffice it to say, Tapper offered little in the way of new evidence to support a conspiracy of silence. In essence, he just repeated a lot of rumors and innuendo. The move was also seen as a way for Tapper to endear himself to Donald Trump, a way to get on Trump's good side and hopefully score some points for Tapper's career and his network, CNN. Well, over the weekend, Tapper also claimed to have interviewed Trump on a variety of topics ranging from the war in Gaza to the administration attacking boats off the coast of Venezuela as part of an anti-drug campaign, to the government shutdown. Big topics, right? There's a twist, though. Tapper conducted the interview via text message. And furthermore, Trump, or someone answering for Trump, only answered a handful of questions and ignored others. And Tapper touted this as a major interview. That did not sit well with Lawrence O'Donnell, a longtime Trump critic and a journalist who has long compelled his colleagues to stand tough against Trump. Now, this is a very long clip, so we want to get right to it. Make sure to watch the whole thing to understand the gravity of his argument and just how embarrassing this is for Jake Tapper.
Donald Trump has become harder to get on Sunday morning, but the desperation remains and I guess deepens. And so yesterday morning, CNN presented a so-called interview with CNN that they can't even prove was Donald Trump. They called it breaking news. They called it, quote, an exclusive new interview with President Trump. That's what they called it. Before the interviewer said this.
The president answered my questions on text about his hopes for this nascent deal.
What? You gave him the questions in writing? So now, instead of letting Trump hide in a phone call where we can at least know that it's him talking, Donald Trump gets to hide behind the black screen of texting? We actually have no idea who texted the replies in that so-called interview. CNN is unable to prove that Donald Trump was actually doing that texting. CNN has not revealed how long it took to get a reply to each of the 5 written questions that apparently got replies from someone who texted those replies or someone who told Donald Trump what to text in those replies, or maybe it was from Donald Trump. The first question was, what happens if Hamas insists on staying in power in Gaza, to which the text reply, and we don't know how long this took, was, and we don't know who did it, the text reply says, complete obliteration. The final slow pitch softball question was, how do you think the government shutdown is going to end? That question got the empty answer it deserved. Someone texted this reply as an answer to that question of how the shutdown is going to end. Good, we are winning and cutting costs, big time, exclamation point. The interviewer then said, I asked a few other questions on text, still waiting for a response on those, Mr. President. Okay, what were those questions? Exactly which questions did Donald Trump refuse to answer? What could be more relevant in reporting an exchange than that is supposed to be with the President of the United States than including the questions he refused to answer? We have no idea. Any questions about Jeffrey Epstein or his sex trafficking friend, Ghislaine Maxwell? Any questions about Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell? We don't know. We have no idea. We have no idea what the other questions were that Donald Trump refused to answer, or whoever was on the other end of that phone refused to answer. When the history of Donald Trump's mental decline is written, it will no doubt include that so-called interview yesterday as a turning point in Donald Trump's White House dealing with the challenge of Donald Trump trying to answer questions during this period of obvious mental decline for Donald Trump. Donald Trump was allowed to become, by CNN, the first president in history to get questions in writing for an interview. Questions that he could take home, as it were, since he was at home. Questions from a reporter. And then Donald Trump was allowed to take, we don't know how much time to reply to those questions. We do know CNN is still waiting for some of them. Something this particular interviewer would be outraged about if Joe Biden had ever done that, or someone pretending to be Joe Biden had done that. This particular interviewer wrote an entire book condemning Joe Biden because he didn't like the way Joe Biden answered questions. He thought Joe Biden wasn't up to the job of answering questions as a presidential candidate, particularly in the presidential debate. But in fact, every one of the answers that Joe Biden did give in that presidential debate in content was better than every answer given by Donald Trump, all of which were insane. But this same interviewer apparently thinks Donald Trump is capable of answering such questions. This same interviewer has never doubted that. If Joe Biden had ever given the answer, quote, complete obliteration, end quote, to what happens next in Gaza or anywhere else in the world, that same interviewer would have pointed to it correctly, I think, as proof of mental incapacity to do the job of president. But Donald Trump, or the person playing Donald Trump in that text game yesterday, took the time to carefully type out complete obliteration. It wasn't a quick and ill-considered reply. It was a carefully typed and written reply, a written reply. And in a world where, as Wall Street puts it, on the illegal Trump tariffs, Trump always chickens out. Anything Donald Trump says in response to a what-if question is always meaningless. And so the insane and reckless and inhuman phrase, complete obliteration, is also actually meaningless because Donald Trump said it, or the person playing Donald Trump in that text game typed it. In the Sunday morning interview business, and it is a business, every time they lower their standards for Donald Trump, that becomes the new standard. And so the other Sunday morning shows, desperate to get Donald Trump, will, according to all their past practices in following each other, into decline, accept written answers from Donald Trump or a person impersonating Donald Trump in reply to their written questions to Donald Trump. And they won't tell us how long it takes Donald Trump or his stand-in to deliver those answers. And they won't tell us what questions Donald Trump or his stand-in refuses to answer. The deviancy of Donald Trump only moves in one direction, down. People working for Donald Trump choose to go down with him. But apparently, they're not the only ones.
So, do you think Jake Tapper looks like he got slapped with some wet lilies this morning? I have to give Lawrence O'Donnell credit. That easily could have just seemed like a mudslinging fight, but he makes very, very strong points here. The fact that Tapper had the gall to accuse Joe Biden's cabinet of covering for him, but would then accept brief text messages from someone claiming to be Donald Trump as an interview is totally ridiculous. But I get it, Jake. We journalists have to pay for our groceries too. Though I'm guessing Jake makes a lot more money than I do. I understand why he needs the paycheck, but good grief, don't kowtow to Trumpian authoritarianism to do it. Don't be a hypocrite. Trump is showing far worse signs of cognitive and physical decline than Joe Biden ever did, so don't ignore that. Go write your book on that and how this possibly syphilitic orange old taco troll is wreaking havoc on our economy, our government, and our way of life. That is, after all, your job as a journalist, Jake Tapper. And Lawrence O'Donnell, bravo, baby. Stay sassy, man. This is Occupy Democrats.